Years ago, my in-laws disinherited my husband because he chose a career they considered feminine. But now, they're coming back, hoping to reap the rewards of his profession. So, we called the police, who just laughed at them. Hold on, Reddit, because this is a roller coaster. I never ever thought I'd be writing this, but here we are. My husband, let's call him Stuart, has had a complicated relationship with his parents for years. They disinherited him nearly a decade ago, and now they've come back into our lives in the worst way possible. Stuart grew up in a strict household. His parents, whom I'll refer to as Robert and Susan, were very traditional and had big expectations for their only son. From a young age, they expected Stuart to follow in his father's footsteps and do something important with his life. In fact, Stuart's parents had emigrated to the US when they were children, and both worked hard to build a decent life for themselves. They expected Stuart to achieve something truly great and raise their economic status. However, Stuart had other plans. He wanted to be an artist, a career his parents did not approve of at all. Even worse, for such traditional parents, he wanted to become a ballet instructor. Stuart developed his passion for ballet thanks to his aunt, who was a dance teacher. Since his parents often worked two jobs, they left him at his aunt's dance school when he was a child. He grew up learning all kinds of dance forms and even performed in several small shows. His parents were okay with it as long as it was just a hobby and the prize money would buy a nice dinner for the family. But when he expressed his desire to pursue it full-time, they went crazy. The tension between Stuart and his parents grew over the years. They saw his passion for ballet as a waste of time and money. They said they hadn't spent a fortune on his education at a private school just to send him off to a career they saw as feminine. They didn't care. They wanted him to become a surgeon, or at least something in the medical field. Despite their disapproval, Stuart followed his dreams. He moved out of his parents' house right after high school and worked various jobs to support himself while attending dance school. The situation became critical when Stuart was 22 and had just landed his first big job. He was so happy and invited his parents, hoping to share his success with them. Instead of being proud, Robert and Susan were furious. They said he was embarrassing the family by pursuing such a feminine career. They called him names and even severed ties with the aunt who had raised him, blaming her for putting those strange ideas in his head. They accused him of abandoning the family and wasting his potential. They told him he was no longer welcome in their home and cut off all contact. Since then, he's been on his own, enjoying life, dancing, and teaching. I met him at one of the summer classes organized by my university. He was teaching ballet to students from a different class. One time, when our teacher was absent, Stuart replaced her, and I couldn't stop admiring his flawless movements. I switched to his class, and this was the first time I approached a man, and the last. The summer class ended, but we kept seeing each other without realizing how 3 years went by. Stuart was open about his strained relationship with his parents from the start. It broke my heart to see how much their rejection hurt him, but I admired that he kept following his dreams. He taught at 2 dance schools and gave private lessons in the basement of his apartment on weekends. The building owner let him do so in exchange for free lessons for his 10-year-old daughter. I graduated, got a job, and we moved into a studio apartment. Before, Stuart had shared a room with 2 other guys. We got married in a small ceremony with only a few close friends and family. His parents were noticeably absent, but Stuart had accepted that. He had built a life for himself without their support, and he was proud of it. He made a decent living, but we lived in the heart of the city, which could make even the wealthiest feel poor. So, by the end of the month, we survived on bagels and peas. Over the years, we realized our life wasn't improving with this way of living, so we decided to move to a quieter city. It was harder because there were fewer job opportunities for Stuart in the suburbs. That's when he decided to open his own dance studio. He'd always dreamed of having his own school, but the costs of setting it up had discouraged him. Now we had the space, so we turned our garage into a stylish dance school. Stuart used to complain that there was no ballet school in the city, and now he was happy not to have any competition. I won't say it was an overnight success because it wasn't. We had to fight. We didn't have enough money for advertising, so we relied on word of mouth. I talked to my coworkers and neighbors, and little by little, it started to grow. Gradually, we began to live the life we had dreamed of, having our own home, a nice car, and enough to fill the car with groceries when we went to the supermarket. It felt like a dream to have food for a month in the fridge. 1 year after we started living in the city, Stuart bought an abandoned factory and turned it into a large dance school, teaching all kinds of dance. He hired other teachers because he's not an expert in all styles. I quit my job and took care of the school's operations. Recently, we bought a summer house in the countryside by the lake. About a month ago, my in-laws suddenly showed up at our door. Stuart was shocked and hesitant, but he let them in. They wanted to reconcile and be part of his life again. They apologized for their mistakes, and there were a lot of tears. They said they were getting older and felt fragile, and they couldn't die with the guilt of having disinherited their only son. Stuart walked out crying. It's not easy for him to forget everything and move on. After he left, they took my hands and asked me to help them reconcile with their son. I didn't want to sound rude, so I said I'd try, though I haven't talked to Stuart about it yet. I don't know if I've seen or read too many stories about greedy parents showing up after their child's success, or if it's just my natural instinct to protect my husband, but something about their reappearance in our lives feels off. I'm not a witch, but that's how I feel. Can you help me with some perspective? Do you think they came back out of love, or do they have hidden motives? Update 1. Thanks for the comments. As most of you said, it's hard to guess their true intentions, so I let Stuart decide without giving my opinion. At first he was unsure, but his optimism came through, as it often does, and he decided to give them a chance. I don't blame him. His optimism is what got him to where he is. Meanwhile, Susan had been inviting us over for dinner, so when Stuart made his decision, we accepted her invitation. It was uncomfortable, but civil. Stuart was holding back, trying not to make things awkward for me. They visited us occasionally, and although the conversations were tense, Stuart appreciated the effort they were putting in. A couple of meetings went by, and I realized that Stuart's repressed anger towards his parents was being held back when it should have been let out. His relationship with them seemed to improve on the surface, but Stuart still had mixed feelings toward them. I suggested therapy, but it didn't surprise me when Stuart responded, since I know him well. He denied that there was any problem worth discussing with a therapist. So, the next best option was confrontation. The next time Susan invited us, I pulled out of the plan and asked Stuart to go alone. He refused to go alone, saying it would be uncomfortable. I told him that's the problem. It shouldn't be uncomfortable to meet with your parents. Let go of your bitterness and have a confrontation once and for all. He went and had an open discussion, but things did improve afterward. However, it didn't take long for them to reveal their true intentions. One afternoon, after a couple of glasses of wine, Susan let slip about their financial troubles. Her business had gone bankrupt, and they were facing foreclosure on their home. We were shocked to hear this. We hadn't expected it, at least not this soon. I was definitely cautious about their intentions, but I gave them the benefit of the doubt. I mean, they never showed up during our tough times, but suddenly when the sun was shining for us, they appeared in our lives. It couldn't be a coincidence, right? Stuart and I exchanged looks, wondering what to say. Sometimes, I wish I could have those telepathic conversations like in TV shows. It would be so helpful in situations like this. Stuart was direct and asked if they wanted money from him. Susan said with embarrassment, "Sweetheart, I know what you're thinking, but trust me. That's not our intention. It's not about the money. We love you. We want you back in our lives." Stuart, naive as ever, said, "Thank God they didn't ask for money because that would have meant they reconciled only for dollars." Susan turned pale and forced a smile. A week later, Robert called Stuart for a private meeting. He laid everything out openly. Unlike what Susan had said, he mentioned that his business was barely surviving, and he had put it up for sale, along with all its resources, tools, website, infrastructure, etc. Their house was about to be foreclosed, so they wanted Stuart to help them. The reason? Because we didn't have children, and for some reason they thought they'd outlive us. Stuart was devastated. He had hoped they truly wanted to reconcile, but it became clear that they were only interested in what he could give them. More specifically, they wanted our summer house and a monthly allowance of $5,000. Stuart was furious and asked why they had hidden their true motives when they could have just asked for money in the first meeting. Susan yelled, "You would have agreed to give us that the first time we met, right?" Stuart said, "So it's all about money, right?" Susan tried to calm him down and said they really loved him and that the money was only a part of it. Stuart shouted, "Then why didn't you come to see me when I was at my lowest in life, struggling for a meal?" Robert interrupted and yelled too. "Because we wanted you to suffer for your mistakes. You chose that feminine profession and gave up on studying something important. We wanted you to rot until you came back to us and begged for forgiveness." Stuart responded, "Well, now you want a part of the property I made with that same feminine profession." Robert yelled, "Whatever, and don't you dare raise your voice in front of us. We made sacrifices for you. You owe us this. We're not beggars. We're asking for what's legitimately ours." Stuart stormed out of the house, furious. He couldn't take it anymore. Susan tried to stop him, but he left. She followed him home and apologized for Robert's outburst, explaining that Robert's hypertension made him say those things. She regretted how things had turned out, but said they were really in trouble, about to lose their home, and needed our help. I have no idea what Stuart is thinking now about all of this. Update 2. After the confrontation, Robert and Susan came back again after a week. Stuart told them he didn't feel comfortable giving them our vacation home, especially after so many years of no contact. He offered to invest in their business so they could support themselves, but that wasn't enough for them. They demanded a share of our property, claiming that as his parents, they were entitled to it. Furthermore, since we don't have children, they thought we didn't need as much money for ourselves and that we should take care of them. Yes, we don't have kids, but that doesn't mean we didn't want one when we were younger. Our finances were so tight that we couldn't even think about bringing a child into our lives. Now that things have improved, we've crossed the age to have a child, but we're considering adopting one anyway. Their accusations infuriated us. Stuart doesn't want to leave them on the street, but before we took on the task of helping them, Stuart thoroughly investigated their financial situation. To our surprise, he discovered that Robert had deliberately put their house up for sale. The mortgage had been paid off long ago, so they lied about facing foreclosure. The truth was, they wanted our vacation home and to take advantage of our income while they lived comfortably by selling their house and business. Stuart called Robert and confronted him with the truth. Robert came up with another lie, saying he was deeply in debt and had to sell his house and business to settle his debts. We all knew that was a lie because Stuart had found out they were planning a trip with their money. They denied it, claiming that it wasn't our business to investigate their lives, that it was their money, and they could do whatever they wanted while it was a son's duty to take care of them. That was the last straw for Stuart. He made it clear that we wouldn't give them a cent and that we were excluding them from our lives. Robert and Susan didn't take it well. They threatened legal action, claiming they had a right to their property, which didn't concern us. They were just empty threats. In this country, when someone threatens someone, it seems like they always want to sue, even when they have no case. Anyway, Stuart was furious and deeply hurt. He had allowed them back into his life only to be betrayed again. We knew we needed to protect ourselves, so we consulted a lawyer. Fortunately, our lawyer assured us that Stuart's parents had no legal right to his properties or assets. However, we still had to be cautious. Stuart drafted a strict will. We're in the process of adopting a child, and we need to secure their social and financial safety. I feel for Stuart for having to deal with such narcissistic parents. They brought this on themselves. I mean, we could have taken care of them if they hadn't acted so arrogantly. Every child wants to fulfill their parents' dreams, but not if those parents try to achieve it through threats and lies. They didn't need to create this facade of debt to extort us. They could have been loving and caring parents. Sadly, they never were. They always saw Stuart as a lifeless resource. So, I know what gets sowed. Update 3 things took a dramatic turn after Stuart cut them off. A few months ago, Robert and Susan relentlessly harassed us. They started showing up at our dance school without any warning, interrupting classes, and even bad-mouthing Stuart. They went as far as contacting Stuart's students to try to tarnish his reputation. They spread the rumor that Stuart and I were physically abusing preteen girls at our dance school. The truth is, the last few months have been a nightmare. We had to involve our lawyer again. The stress was taking its toll on both of us. Stuart was losing sleep, and I was constantly tense. We knew we had to take action to stop this harassment, so we decided to involve the police. Although our students and their parents know us personally and haven't taken any action against us, it was just a matter of time before someone could be manipulated and report us based on their rumors. So, we filed a formal defamation report against them. We didn't want the police to arrest them, but they needed to be put in their place. A notice was sent to them to stay away from us, or they'd risk spending the rest of their days in jail. The next time Robert and Susan showed up at our dance school, we called the police, explained the situation, and showed the threatening messages we had received. The officers were understanding and gentle with them due to their old age. Still, my in-laws got into an argument with the officers. They told them to stay out of family matters. One of the officers was literally laughing when Susan asked them to tell us to comply with their demands. Robert said he had spent so much money raising Stuart, and now he had the right to reap the rewards of his investment. The officers tried to handle the situation calmly, but when my in-laws refused to back down, they were sternly warned to stay away from us and were eventually escorted off the property. The police also advised us to dissuade them for a while, but they soon found other ways to accuse us. Despite the restraining order and police intervention, Robert and Susan didn't back down. They stood in front of our house and dance school with flyers and postcards, calling us frauds. They felt entitled to our property just because they gave birth to and raised Stuart. When we called the police again, Robert argued that they hadn't written anyone's name on the flyers and gave the officers a hard time. I overheard one of the officers telling them that if they had such problems with us, they should go to court. I don't blame him. He said this to mitigate the chaos they were creating in the street. But their stubbornness led them to file a lawsuit claiming they were entitled to a portion of Stuart's earnings and properties. Our lawyer assured us it was a baseless lawsuit, but we still had to go through the process of defending ourselves in court. The legal battle was exhausting and costly. We had to gather evidence, attend hearings, and deal with all the stress from the nonsense they made up. They asked for support, claiming Stuart was their only son and that they had invested in him, so they deserved a return. Stuart was emotionally drained, and it was affecting his creativity. It was hard for him to work on his dance classes, and we had to find some teachers to replace him. It broke my heart to see him so tired and sad every night. Still, we knew we had to keep going. We couldn't let them win. We had worked too hard to build our life together, and we weren't going to let anyone take it from us. After months of back and forth, we finally had our day in court. Our lawyer presented a solid case, highlighting the years of estrangement and the lack of legal basis for Robert and Susan's claims. They constantly played the elderly and poor parent card. At one point, Stuart even agreed to pay a one-time sum as a reward for raising him, but they clung to their demands for a house and a monthly allowance. It wasn't much, but Stuart wanted to end it all. After much negotiation, Robert accepted the one-time payment, but demanded $1 million. I almost fainted when I heard that number. Before Stuart could react, the judge dismissed not only the lawsuit but the entire case. The judge saw through their manipulations and ruled in our favor. It was a huge relief, but we still had to deal with the emotional battle. Robert and Susan were furious. They stormed out of the courtroom, but not before making one last threat. They swore they'd find another way to make Stuart pay. The good news in all of this is that their lawyer was sanctioned. According to our lawyer, it's not uncommon for some lawyers to take these kinds of cases because, despite the sanctions, they usually ask for money up front, and at the end of the day they win, regardless of whether they get anything for their clients. I guess there are bad professionals in every field. We've also seen bad teachers at our dance school, the ones who don't correct students' movements, show up late, or finish classes before the scheduled time. These are the teachers we always let go, because it's not good for the business in the long run. As for Stuart's parents, we also took further steps to protect ourselves. We installed security cameras around our house and dance school to make sure we were prepared for whatever Robert and Susan might try next. The police advised us to hire security for our summer home, or possibly rent it out to avoid further intrusion from my in-laws. We definitely didn't want another lawsuit or another encounter with them or the police. We didn't need this kind of problem in our lives. It's been over 2 weeks since all the drama ended. I hope they give up after this. A few days ago, I found out they wanted to buy back their house from the new owner at the same price they sold it for, but the new owner raised the price by 30%. Now they're busy dealing with him. I feel sorry for that poor guy, but it's good for us that they're busy with someone else. We've also started suing them for defamation since we're still within the 12-month period since they defamed us and our business. I'll let you know how that turns out. Update 4. Well, I don't know where to start since there's a lot to cover in this update. I'm not sure if it's as much as the last one, but there are some important things to share. First of all, we won the defamation lawsuit. It hasn't been pretty going back to court and seeing their faces, but at least we won. It's not like we gained much since the lies they spread about our business didn't have significant consequences. It could have been worse, but it wasn't. The judge awarded us about $3,500 in compensation, which is almost all taken up by lawyer fees. Many of you in the previous comments recommended suing, as it seemed like the best path, but in my experience, it's not always advisable. Suing is not free, and it doesn't always pay off when you factor in the emotional costs and the time we lost dealing with this. The truth is, we came out of this lawsuit losing, not just in stress, but in the hours we could have spent working on our business instead of dealing with this. So, for those of you dealing with similar problems, I suggest you think it through carefully. I've read this kind of advice in other similar Reddit posts, and I don't think it's always the best option. The only good thing we can take from this is that hopefully it will serve as a lesson for my in-laws to not return with their same tactics. But only time will tell. At least for now they haven't done so, but you never know if in a week, months, or years they'll try again. But that's not all with them, because there's still the part where they tried to break into the summer house. This happened shortly after they lost the defamation lawsuit. Fortunately, the advice to install cameras was great, so we were able to quickly see that someone was there. We received a call from a neighbor who said someone had entered the house. At first, he thought it was us, but he didn't see our car, nor had we gone to visit him, which he found strange because we always greet him when we go to the house. So, we checked the cameras, and it was them. We called the police, and Stuart went over to file the report and show the evidence from the cameras. I think we're going to refrain from suing them for the broken window they used to enter, since at the end of the day, it's easier just to buy a new one. However, they could face charges for trespassing, which carry up to 6 months in prison and a $50 fine. If anything happens with that, I'll update you. If there's no update, it's because they didn't face any punishment. Edit. My neighbors didn't call the police because they didn't know if the intruders were trespassers or people we had invited. Update 5. Just a quick update to let you know what happened. They haven't received any prison time since they're elderly, and the judge took pity on them. I don't think they're too old to face that kind of punishment, but they must have caught the judge in a good mood that day. He just ordered them to pay a $90 fine, which covers what we spent to repair the window and a not-so-fancy dinner. I wish I had better news, as I was hoping for more too, but that's all. At least they've been quiet these past few days.